Is Josh Allen going to play against the Vikings? And if not, what do the Bills have left? This is Crossover Thursday with Locked on Bills. Excited to get into it.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, real quick before we start the conversation with Joe Marino of Locked On Bills, while we were recording this, it broke that Cam Dantzler had his left ankle in a walking boot, so I super don't expect him to play on Sunday. Didn't know about that when we were recording. Just a quick note there. Okay, here's a conversation.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills, joined by Luke Braun, the host of Locked On Vikings, here to get you ready for Bills versus Vikings in Week 10. A big matchup here. A couple of teams with good records and certainly a lot of familiarity from both sides of the equation. A lot of players and coaches that have spent time on the other side of it. But first here, Crossover Thursday is presented by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is so much fun and it's easy to play. There's no competing with other players. It's just you versus the projections available. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. It can literally take less than 60 seconds to enter. It's that easy. We love Prize Picks, and we know you will too. In fact, first-time users, you can receive a 100% instant deposit match on your first deposit of $100, or just use our promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON for that instant deposit match up to $100. Luke, what's going on, man?
Hey, Joe. Been a bit of a week for us, huh?
I'd say. I guess one
Can
of
we
these
start there?
Yeah. There's an elbow to talk about, I'm sure.
An elbow fint in the room.
I wasn't ready for that level of wit. So that's
I
yeah.
regretted that immediately.
You should. We'll see. We'll see. Commenters on YouTube, let us know what you think of Luke's
commenters. Please roast me for that.
Yeah. Joe. Please do. So we do start these conversations by getting into the biggest story for each team, and from the Bills side of it, it's Josh Allen's availability. It's the elbow.
Yeah, what's the deal there?
Well, the deal is, and I guess I expected Sean McDermott to address it the way that he did, and he's day to day, and we'll see, right?
Yeah,
Coach McDermott's always pretty hush hush when it comes to the injury stuff, and so I didn't anticipate we'd get much information. Maybe we will later in the week, but the reality is Josh Allen's availability is a huge tipping point for this game. Obviously, for Buffalo, it's a different script without him. And a player that would start in his place is one that I know Vikings fans are well familiar with, and that's Case Keenum. And
yes, legend for life.
Of course, right? I mean, they got great run there with the Vikings. So the reality is, for the Bills, their best opportunity, obviously, to win the game is if Josh Allen is there to play quarterback and certainly play it to the level that we expect him to. And it's especially concerning to me against Minnesota, who, if there's been a weakness, it feels like it's the pass defense, right? 7.9 yards per attempt. That's second most in the NFL this year. They allow the 6th most passing yards per game. And so without Josh Allen, the Bills are not positioned as well to take advantage of where Minnesota has been the most vulnerable, which is pass defense. And so it leads me to my question. Is it a rallying moment for the Bills? And I think if you want to take the optimistic viewpoint, you say, yeah, maybe this is, where I don't think there's an expectation that Josh Allen is out for a number of weeks, but certainly this week feels, at least to me, like it's unlikely. How does the team respond? Do they use this as a let's go get this done and keep our season on track, or is it a big stumbling block and they really lose their identity as a football team?
Well, my question is more practical than that. You're a lot closer to this story than I am. Gut check. Is he playing? I mean, I know Sean McDermott's not going to tell you crap about it. Is he going to go? I mean, the UCL, he's had that injury before. It kept him out for several weeks. It seems like, especially if you're familiar with the baseball version of that injury, it seems like it's pretty serious business. Is he going to go? Is it smart to play him, or is this one of those things that can re-aggravate? I mean, what are the odds? That's what we're worrying about here in Vikings land. Is like, what are the odds that this is a Case Keenum game, or is this just one of those things where they're going to play it coy? Josh Allen will play, and whatever. We're going to be not talking about this at all come kickoff.
Luke, this is one of those situations where it's I don't want to use the word unfortunate, but it's a reality of covering these teams like we do. And I hate to kind of be cliche here, but I'm not a doctor, right? I know how to
Of
talk
course.
football. I know the implications of injuries, but I don't know the severity of the UCL. I don't know the long-term repercussions. I don't feel good about Josh Allen playing in this game. And I
Okay.
don't want to say that any game is not important in the NFL, but this is a NFC game, and you
Yep.
come out of this and you've got Cleveland, an AFC game, and the Patriots coming up. I
Yeah.
think that
Start winning
there's
division games. Yeah.
yeah, and they haven't won a division game to this point in the season. Surprisingly, they've only played two, and they've lost them both. And
Hmm.
so, my gut is that he doesn't play, but I don't think it's something where we can completely dismiss the possibility.
Got it. Okay. That feels like about where my read on the situation is. For the Vikings, there's a lot of talk in the media about Stefan Diggs and how his relationship the last couple of years with the Vikings was pretty strained and all that. I think most of the principal actors there have moved on or just straight up been fired. But the
Mhm.
media is going to make a huge deal out of Stefan Diggs. What I'm looking forward to is the reunion of Stefan Diggs and Adam Thielen. Those guys were like Turk and JD from Scrubs when they were here. Just like couldn't be better friends. And Diggs and Jefferson have grown pretty close as well. So I think this will be a more wholesome reunion than I think Vikings media is trying to make it out to be. But you got Harrison Phillips also on our side coming back to play in Buffalo. We have been loving him, let me tell you, and both on and off the field, um, and all of that. But for us, it's a little bit of a litmus test because the Vikings haven't had one of those wins where you say, "Man, there it is. There's your proof that they are a good team." They feel very fake. That's what I've been saying in every one of these crossovers where they go, man, they like barely beat the Commanders. They barely beat that. They had to come back against the Bears. They went down to the wire with the Lions, who have won 2 games. Um, like they're not beating those bad teams as much as you would expect a good team to beat those bad teams. Like what you guys go up against a bad team, you're hanging 45 on them, and Josh Allen is out by the third quarter. That's not happening here. But also, we haven't really played any good teams except Philadelphia on Monday night, and they blew us out. So this is the next true contending team we get to play on our schedule. And I think that's true even if Josh Allen doesn't play. I mean, it's just a good roster. We'll talk about, I want to ask you about like other injuries and stuff too. But feels like the Bills, even with Case Keenum, the Bills are still probably the second best team we've played next to Eagles. Um, and so if we can at least hang and just show, hey, we belong among this tier of teams, I think that will go a long way toward getting people to really buy into the Vikings. Because right now, saying they're 7-1 doesn't go very far with like anyone.
Well, you don't have to give the 7 wins back. You know,
Right. That's
I think
that's the thing. It's like they can be 500 from here on out and
sure.
still like almost certainly win the division, but it's more about like, are they a paper tiger in the playoffs? There's there's a moral victory to be had here, win or lose, if you will.
It reminds me so much of the Bills in 2019. They went 10-6, really good record midway through. The paper tiger term was thrown out there. It was, who have they beaten? And it's like, I think that was a moment for me in my journey covering football where I learned to stop trying to diminish the accomplishments of football teams. The Vikings
It's
played
hard to
8
win.
games and they won 7 of them. And I know that there's been some favorable moments, but that comes from preparation. That comes from being ready for those moments to be able to capitalize on your opportunities. And so go ahead and win all the games you want by 3, because one of the talking points for the Bills side of things is that they don't win close games, and I think they're like
That's
2-8 in
hilarious.
their last. So it's
Because
whatever
games never get
flavor there
close.
is,
They keep
man.
winning by 3 touchdowns. Oh no.
Right? It's like, oh yeah, they can win 38-3, but can they win 20-21? Okay.
Do you want them to? Like, Jesus. Back with Joe in just a bit. But first things first, This episode is brought to you by Blue Nile, the original online jeweler. They have a huge selection of independently graded diamonds and pieces priced significantly below traditional retailers. And they have experts on hand 24/7 to help you make sure you're getting something special. Like, do you know what a princess cut is? You probably should. And if you don't, they've got people who can help you out. Available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at any budget. So make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com, use code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BLUENILE.com, code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com, code LOCKEDON.
All right, Luke, let's get into some of the key matchups here that can win the game for each team. I'll give you the floor here to start.
JJ versus Trey White feels awesome. That's going to be good TV. Uh, Justin Jefferson has been the focal point of the Vikings offense. Everything funnels through him. And I'm super excited to see how he fares against Trey White, just like generally. I mean, he's gotten some one-on-one matchups, and it hasn't been the domination that I thought it would be, like against Benjamin St. Juice. Now he got 115 yards. He clearly won that matchup, but I thought he St. Juice got some licks in. He struggled against Darius Slay in some like pure one-on-one situations. I'm curious to see how the Bills do this. Do they trust Trey White one-on-one with Justin Jefferson? I kind of think based on the tape they will. Or at least that's how I would approach it is say, all right, Trey White, you got 18. Good luck. And I don't know if the Bills are a shadow team or not, so let me know about that. But if that doesn't work and if Jefferson can get his yards in, I mean, he won those matchups when it was Marshawn Lattimore, who's certainly no slouch. So if Justin Jefferson starts to get that momentum, how much will it take for the Bills to then start like capping it with a safety and changing their strategy? How teams handle Justin Jefferson has been one of the most interesting subplots of the Vikings season. There've been a lot of different strategies. Some have worked and some haven't. So I don't know. What do you think the Bills will do? Is this going to be straight up Jefferson versus Trey White, or are they going to say, we'll double him and we'll put Trey White on Adam Thielen?
Well, I think the first question to answer there is Trey White going to play? He hasn't
That
played
too, yeah.
since Thanksgiving of last year. He's been activated. He's eligible to play. But they have been very, very, very cautious about putting him back into the lineup. And so will he make his debut against Minnesota and be tasked with locking up Justin Jefferson? I don't know. I don't know. But there is a possibility of that. I think more likely you're going to see Kyer Elam, the Bills' first-round pick, Dane Jackson, who's been kind of a fill-in guy over the last couple of years, Christian Benford, a sixth-round rookie out of Villanova. Those have been the cast of characters at corner for the Bills. And, of course, if they play him in the slot, he'll get tasked with going up against Taron Johnson, who's a really high-quality slot corner. But that's a question still. Does Trey White make his season debut? And if he does, is it up against Justin Jefferson, who's been one of the most productive receivers in the league over the last couple of seasons?
I feel like nobody has a good slot corner. Are you guys the only team with a good slot corner?
Well, no, Mike Hilton's good in Pittsburgh. Kenny Moore with the Colts is a high quality slot.
Oh, Kenny Moore, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so there's some in the AFC.
Yeah,
It feels like everybody's got their like $1.5 million guy that's bounced
Yeah.
between 7 different teams. Ours is Chandon Sullivan. He was on the Packers for a while,
Mhm.
and he's been the marked man sometimes. But yeah, it, that'll be really interesting if the Vikings can't just like put Jefferson in the slot and then take advantage of that matchup. If that slot corner can hold up, that puts a pretty big ding in things. That's one of the Vikings' favorite ways to get it. But what matchup are you watching?
I'm very interested in seeing how the Bills' run defense fares against Dalvin Cook.
Hmm.
And the last 2 weeks have not been good run defense for the Bills.
Really?
Now, the previous several weeks have been phenomenal run defense. The Bills, whatever metric you wanted to find to talk about run defense,
Mhm.
the Bills were the best. Okay. The last 2 weeks they have struggled. They gave up 208 rushing yards to Green Bay. They gave 174 last week to the Jets. Michael Carter, he's a good running back, but I mean, he wasn't even their starter until Brees Hall went down.
Mhm.
And he averaged 6 yards after contact per rush against the Bills
Goodness.
on 17 rushes.
And
And
Matt
so
Milano was out, right?
Matt Milano was out, and that's a very,
big.
very big deal. But I will
Yeah.
say this: the Bills are a 4-2-5 defense. They're base nickel. They very, very, very rarely play a
Oh.
third linebacker, even against teams that run the football. And so you've seen over the last couple of weeks, teams do a good job of stressing the Bills with some of the alignments and getting receivers involved in blocking and running against light boxes and creating a ton of production running the football. And so the Bills are going to give you 6-man boxes, and they're going to challenge their front to be able to really be gap sound. And over the last 6 quarters or 2 games, really, they haven't been. And they're going to be without Gregory Rousseau, who's a starting
Mhm.
defensive end, their best run stopping defensive end. That's a big loss in a game like this. He's got an ankle sprain. And I'm really interested in seeing how the Bills on defense fit the run and play the run against one of the best running backs in the league in Dalvin Cook. And when you think about the offenses that have been able to find success against Buffalo, it's those that can get the ball out quick, the quick passing game and running the football. And in a lot of ways, that's Minnesota, not a team that's had success or even frequency pushing the ball down the field. I think in a lot of ways, the Vikings offense matches up really, really well against Buffalo. And
This
I'm fascinated to see how Dalvin Cook is able to take advantage of the opportunities that are going to be there for him on Sunday afternoon.
this is fascinating. So another subplot the Vikings have been dealing with is defenses coming out in their base package, whether it's 3-4 or 4-3, to combat the Vikings 11 personnel. The Vikings love to run out of 11 personnel. So when you say Bills love to be in nickel, blah blah blah, we're just going to live in nickel versus 11 all game then, probably, because that's what
Mm-hmm.
both teams want. Um, And like Miami did it, and then Arizona did it. Washington did a little bit of it, but they didn't have to because they had uh Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen, who were absolutely kicking butt. Um, they all had success stymieing the Vikings run game to varying degrees. Arizona kind of fell apart, but Miami and Washington in particular had success stymieing the Vikings run game by just having more bigs out there, more linebackers and stuff. But if the Bills are reticent to do that, then it's okay. This is going to be mano a mano, and the Vikings will get to run against a nickel corner like they want to. Um, but that also means the Vikings have found some success preying on base packages in the run game, saying, "All right, you got a linebacker. Well, now Justin Jefferson's in the slot, and we're doing that on the strong side. So that's your Sam linebacker over there on Justin Jefferson one-on-one. Good luck." And they've found that earlier in the season, especially, they found a lot that way. So there's something about like the Vikings trying to dictate the matchups a little bit more, unless you're just going to straight up have someone shadow, which is what Washington did. Um, but that is now fascinating. And I guess my question is, how do you feel about the guys that will play up front? Because I know it's a little banged up in that defense, but especially in pass protection, the interior of the Vikings has struggled a lot. Right guard is a rookie, Ed Ingram. He had a decent game last week. He's had some absolute stinkers. I mean, some like I was doing cut ups and putting Benny Hill music under it. It was awful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Garrett Bradbury has been better, I guess, this season, but he's still very undersized. So a big, strong nose tackle is going to be able to cause problems. And Ezra Cleveland got his butt handed to him by Jonathan Allen last week. So he's been pretty good all season, but horrible game last week. So there's at best, inconsistency at best. Um, so how do you feel about those guys? Because that is, if the Bills are gonna, hold the Vikings below 15, 16, 17 points, um, that's probably a big reason if you guys have the horses.
Well, it's an interesting question. And there's a part of me that says, yes, the Bills do have a ton of depth on their defensive line. They're paying a lot of players. They invest heavily there every single offseason. They have Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones and Tim Settle and Jordan Phillips. Those are all really good interior defensive linemen. But as I said on my preview episode yesterday for Locked On Bills, and I talked about the Vikings offensive line, I said, hey, if they can be had, it's the middle three. And I
Hmm.
also paused and I said, I've previewed every offensive line this year, and I've talked about areas where they are vulnerable and where there's going to be opportunities to win one-on-ones. And it feels like week after week, it doesn't happen, right? Like these offensive linemen that have had struggles throughout the course of the year, whether it's rookies or just middling veteran players that we know who they are. The Bills haven't done enough to take advantage of matchups that they should win. And
Hmm.
so does that change this week? I don't know. Statistically, the Bills' defense is very, very good, but
Yeah, do they
I,
just want to play the game they play and say we've kicked everybody's butt doing this? Come at
Well,
us.
I think what's been challenging over the last 6 quarters, which is where Bills Mafia's mind is very heavily weighed because it hasn't been their best football. The offense has kind of let the defense down, and I think
Mhm.
everybody that knows football kind of understands that the best way to help your defense is play good offense. If you want to help stop the run, well, score points, right? And they haven't, they scored 3 points in the second half against the Packers, and I mean, I think they might have scored 3 again last week against the Jets. It was not a good situation where it's kind of turtled up on them a little bit. And so I I'm interested to see how that all comes together. On paper, the Bills should have the players to be able to take advantage of some of that, but in reality, it hasn't always shown up with consistency.
We're going to wrap this up with Joe in just a bit, but first, let me talk to you about a good old gamble. BetOnline.net is your one-stop shop for all things sports betting, stats, news, analysis, and all of that, even some podcasts, so you can get all of the latest odds and trends from any sport, not just football, but basketball, baseball. You can bet right in the middle of events with their live betting module. You can build weird props, wacky parlays. I know y'all love to do that. You can even do something like monitor the spread over the course of the week. If you were on it, you could have gotten Vikings plus 7.5, which will look really good if Case Keenum plays, or you can wait until you can emotionally hedge on a pick 'em because it's not looking like Josh Allen will play, and then he does play, and suddenly you have the Bills in a pick 'em. All of that stuff is available at betonline.net, where the game starts.
All right, Luke, prediction time here. They make us do it, so we shall. Would you like to go first?
They make us do it. You got to do a score prediction, I guess. I don't like score predictions. I like looking at the bet online odds and then sort of formulating it based on that. But the bet online odds are, I think, in a state of great flux because we don't
Yeah,
know what's
no
going to happen
quarterback. Yeah,
with.
yeah.
Yeah, they opened at least bet online opened 7.5 points in favor of the Bills. Um, Currently sitting at 3.5 points as we record this. As you, dear listener, are listening to it, it will likely be very different. But right now, as I'm looking at it, it's favoring Buffalo by 3.5, and the over/under is 43, which implies something like 23-20 Buffalo. That feels, I guess, like, how do I even out between what I think would happen if Josh Allen plays and what I think would happen if Case Keenum plays? If Case Keenum plays, it feels like a low scoring game to me, um, just because of what the Case Keenum led Bills have been. And, we saw him, he is kind of lightning in a bottle here. And everybody in the organization kind of knew that Case Keenum wasn't actually a 13-3 quarterback. And that's why Minnesota let him walk and go be backups for everybody else. Um, but hey, as far as backups go, hard to do better. Um, I don't know how well the Vikings offense is going to work here, but based on what you said about like base package and stuff, I kind of feel it. I feel like like the Vikings might be able to move the ball, especially if guys like Trey White or Matt Milano are not playing or not 100%. We're kind of catching you at the best possible time to catch you. It feels
Yeah.
like. Um, so I'm stalling. I'm going to talk this. I'm just talking it out, but I'll go with, based on what Vegas says, I'm going to go 24-23. Screw it. Go Vikings.
All right. I wish we knew who was playing quarterback for the Bills. If Josh Allen were playing in this game, well, I mean, he's one of the best players in the league. Of course, I would much more like the Bills' chances of winning the game. And like I kind of talked about at the opening, you feel like a great opportunity to throw the football, which is the bread and butter of the Bills. And look, Case Keenum's not going to be able to take advantage of that to the level
Mhm.
of a Josh Allen. But I am admittedly going to take an optimistic position here for the Bills. And let me tell you why. Bills have won 6 in a row at home, which is their longest home winning streak since 1998. They lost last week to the New York Jets. Sean McDermott, as head coach of the Bills, is 22-11, coming off of a loss that's dating back to 2017. And since 2017, that's the second highest win percentage coming off of a loss for any team that's not the Kansas City Chiefs. Since 2019, which is an important year, I think, in the world of the Buffalo Bills, because that's really kind of when they became the team that we know them as today. They're 12-4 coming off of a loss, which is also number 2 in the NFL behind the Chiefs. So this is a team that has traditionally played well coming off of a loss. And I think for the first time this year, they've been doubted a little bit.
I was gonna say,
And
how do you respond to that? Like,
yeah,
how do you
and so
respond to that getting punched in the mouth a little bit by losing to the
100
Jets?
100%. I think they're eager to play again. I think it's good for them to be at this vantage point, right? To have a little, as Von Miller would say, a little, kind of take your medicine a little bit here,
Mm.
and learn from it. It's good medicine, and I think whenever I find myself kind of twisted up in predictions, and Luke, a lot of times I make predictions and it doesn't feel hard to me. Like I feel like I know how the game's going to go. I know what the script is going to look like, but with some of the variables in this game, it's really really challenging for me. But whenever I find myself in this spot, I kind of cling to my belief in the leadership of the Bills. Whether that's Brandon Beane, the general manager, but also the coaching staff of Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier and Ken Dorsey and the players that are on this football team. I don't think that they're willing to let the last 6 quarters derail what they want to achieve this season. And like I said at the beginning of this, I think is in a lot of ways a come together opportunity for the team. Now, I could whiff on this, Luke. There's a good chance of that. And I think the Vikings are very, very capable of coming in and winning this football game. There is no doubt there's a clear script for that to happen, in my opinion. But because of all the optimism that I said I was going to cling to, I have it as 20-17 Bills.
All right. Bills win, and that is the under. I think I took
Yeah,
the over by a point.
I thought through the points kind of deliberately here, and again I am operating under the belief that I think Case Keenum's going to play quarterback.
Okay.
The 17 that I have for Minnesota was me looking back at the Bills this year. They haven't allowed more than 21 points to anybody.
Oh my
Like
God.
yeah, so they're tough to score.
Jesus.
They're tough to score on. I mean,
Leslie Frazier.
yeah, he schemes it up good. He's a great defensive coordinator. I think there's head coaching hype out there, which I would have my
I think it's
concerns about.
overdue, honestly. And that's
Well,
coming from a guy who covers the team that fired him.
yeah, I would like that for Leslie, but it
Yeah.
certainly would be a loss for Buffalo. But yeah, I mean and the thing about that is they've been injured all year long, at every level. There's been significant injuries to this defense. They haven't had Trey White all year. Micah Hyde's out for the year. A lot of good players that haven't been available to them, but they keep limiting points. And so because I think that Minnesota will, kind of be in that 17 to 20 point range, and I have some level of belief that this can be a rallying opportunity for the offense. I think they can kind of get to that 20. That's kind of where I got to, at the 20 to 17 mark. But it could be
I could
24 to
see
20,
that.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if the Bills win, the path is through Stephon Diggs, who's look, he's not going to say it, but he's going to have a little chip on his shoulder,
Oh,
right?
for sure.
Former
Yeah.
team, got a little to prove it. It's fine. He doesn't hold any ill will, but come on, I mean, he's Stephon Diggs. Of course, he's going to make some drama out of it. And I think he's the kind of guy that can take that drama and turn it into production. I think that's just what fuels him. So of course he should. Um, so I think that can take that. And the Vikings currently have one of their corners is Patrick
Cam
Peterson.
Dantzler. Yep.
And Cam Dantzler is questionable. Probably he's been dealing. He was questionable with a neck injury, and then he left the game with an ankle injury against Washington. So it might be a rookie, 4th-round rookie, Caleb Evans on Stephon Diggs. That might be the matchup to exploit, or put him in the slot on Shannon Sullivan, which is also a matchup the Vikings exploited with. Or no, that was he was gone by then. By the time Shannon Sullivan was in Green Bay, but still. One other matchup that I thought of that when you were talking, when you mentioned Von Miller. Christian Darrisaw, I have to tell everybody about him. He's
Elite player.
all pro. I think
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
should be. That versus Von Miller versus one of those really experienced edges, and he's been hitting some tough edges. He's not had a cupcake schedule by any stretch of the imagination. Had Montez Sweat a lot last week, did great against that. Ran up against Philly, who's just stacked to the nines with good edge rushers. Von Miller will be a very interesting challenge for a young breakout player.
Yeah. I gave Darrisaw plenty of flowers on my preview episode yesterday for Locked On Bills. Love scouting him at Virginia Tech, and I love the player that he's developed into for the Vikings. Let me ask you about one more player here, Dalvin Tomlinson. What are you hearing about his availability?
They're being very coy about it. That will hurt a lot if he's not out there. The backup interior, they did admirably last week without Dalvin Tomlinson, but I don't really trust their consistency. But yeah, calf injury, they're calling it week to week. and they didn't put him on IR or anything. So I think it's a true week to week. They also called Irv Smith week to week, and then it turned out that he was going to be out for 8 weeks, and they traded for TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah.
So I think Kevin O'Connell wants to lie about these things. So I
Yeah.
don't really trust anything that they've said about injuries. Which, hey, yeah, fair play, right? So I wish I had a better answer. I don't know. They're calling him week to week. Take that as you will.
See, and you sitting here making me call whether or not Josh Allen's going to play. Eh,
Okay, gut check. No. If I were to put myself to the same standard I held you, um, calf injuries are nagging and lingering, and they seem a little bit um more cautious than I think the last training staff was with all the sports science and stuff. They don't want to re-aggravate. They pushed some guys back a lot too early the last couple years, and it really
mhm.
screwed with them. Um, so it feels like these Vikings are a little bit more cautious. So if I had to pick gun to my head, I would guess no. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of guesswork in it, just like with Josh Allen.
All right, folks, there it is. Luke Braun, host of Locked On Vikings. I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills. Enjoyed this conversation, Luke. Unfortunately, we don't get to play each other very
I
often.
know.
So, we could be really optimistic and say maybe we could talk again in February.
There it is.
I
The
think
0
we
and
both.
4 bowl. It's
Hey,
destined.
oh my God! You want to talk? That's the Super Bowl matchup that football fans deserve, and unfortunately,
Yeah.
somebody would have to lose the game.
Oh,
And
meteors hitting the stadium for sure.
man, that honest to God, Roger Goodell, if you're listening, where do we sign?
Goodell,
Where do we sign for that matchup? All right, Luke,
right?
this was a lot of fun, my guy. For everyone out there, thanks so much for listening. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the respective podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Bills and Locked On Vikings your first listen every day. There's plenty of other great podcasts on the network for you to check out. So surf around and find them. And we look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.